Nothing beats success. So the idea over here is that psychology, human psychology, is creating a situation that if there is a success story in the ecosystem, then it's much easier to for the local entrepreneurs to join the wagon and also become entrepreneurs. So an ecosystem can really take off after a success story. Someone can think of an early success story in a country that made a breakthrough from this country. That's actually a very difficult question, but if you can send it in the chat, I'd love to hear. I have two examples actually, so I'm going to share them as well. So the idea is that when you have a success story, something happens with the population that sees this success story, and then the youngsters are kind of like, hey, I'm going to start a startup. I'm not going to be a lawyer or a doctor. And that's exactly what happened in Israel and also in Estonia. Israel was, the first success story was ICQ in the 90s, sold to AOL for about $250 million. That was giant news in Israel back then. And I remember that all the 17, 16-year-olds, teenagers were now thinking, okay, wow, that's amazing. I'm going to do that as well. In Estonia, it was the same case with Skype. And Skype is a semi-Estonian company, although they say that it's a full Estonian company. And again, the success of Skype created what they call the Skype mafia, which is talented entrepreneurs after the exit, building more and more companies. So success story is vital. No events or whatever are ever going to cover the same milestone as a great success story, and governments should push to be in a situation that the ecosystem has success stories. Now, big success stories do take a lot of time. So the governments need to create a snowball. So, you know, like a rolling snowball, it takes a lot of time and it starts very, very small. So the idea is that the government is supposed to start rolling the snowball and creating it. And then when it reaches the critical mass and it keeps on rolling, then you leave it, basically. You leave it to the private sectors. The private sectors, more than anything, is investors and corporations. But until it does, until the private sector sees the ROI, the return on investment, the government has to do the first push. One more thing about the success is that basically you have to share and celebrate the success story with your local population in the outside world. And over here, it has to do with marketing and branding. Estonia does an amazing job, not only in creating the success story, but also in promoting them. Everyone knows about them, about Skype, about Taxify, about PipeDrive, because they're really pushing them to be in a situation that people know. It's not enough that someone is succeeding, you also want to promote and market it. And that's an art for itself. So they're a great example of someone doing that just right. One more thing to think about is change the local perception of the population. Some governments are not encouraging risk-taking, and that's a little bit of a problem. There are some societies where taking risk is totally frowned upon, when even the word entrepreneurs has negative connotation, especially in East Europe, for example. When you say entrepreneur, then people are saying, oh yeah, you're one of those that are tricking people and so on. So a government also has the responsibility of changing the mindset of the population, and this is something that you can do, and it's much needed. One more thing for governments is it's okay to niche down on industries. So just like we talked about Singapore and blockchain, that's great to say, hey, this city or country are only doing blockchain. That's what they're really, really good at. There is a network effect in focusing in one ecosystem and become the mecca of this industry, basically. So the idea of spreading thin and saying, no, we're going to do 100 industries usually does not work very well. Every city should choose more or less 3 types of industries that are the main focus point, or even one in that case. So that's a good tip. And one more thing to say is that with all the support, try to avoid the hype. So if you're a government and you're focused, for example, in setting up an event for thousands of people and spending giant budgets on events and so on, of millions of dollars, it's happening. I know a few examples. Then it's not something that's really going to impact the ecosystem other than a little bit of hype and having a little bit more tourists to visit this convention and then forget about your ecosystem. Do things that matter on the long term.